my question is then, because that tweet was particularly pointed towards quote unquote Islamists, and is there a hypocrisy that is so obvious and apparent to you within the Islamist, within the left wing, within whatever lefties, liberals in the journalistic sphere, in the information sphere, in the political sphere? What is that hypocrisy, and why is it not obvious for me to see it? Somebody who's just trying to observe from the outside, why is it so difficult for me to parse through this hypocrisy? Is this hypocrisy on the Islamist side? Is it on the Hindutva side? Why is this so difficult?
Well, look, Hindutva has its own hypocrisies, but that's a different matter. For me, the worst hypocrisy is when, you have, and you need to take this sort of trajectory of how anthropologically religions have developed, right? With Hinduism, we had our sort of wars of religion, and the Rig Veda was a sort of treaty of Westphalia, where everyone agrees to mind their own business, not that poke their nose into other people's business. So in that sense, what happens in the 1600s in Europe has already happened in about 1000 BC in India, and you devolve into this kind of chillax, man, organized religion is shit, just do what you want, do you kind of thing, like they say.
3,000 years ago?
Yeah, about 3,000 years ago. I mean, I'm not going to get into this debate because some people say Rig Veda is 5,000 years old and all of that. I'm just going by what Romila Thapar taught me in Ancient History of India, which is, again, you're going to get a lot of abuse for this, but whatever. Right. With Christianity, it comes about after a long adjustment period, and then you have the wars of religion in Europe. But remember, European Christianity and Christianity influenced by Europe in, say, Latin America, which was colonized much earlier, tends to become a lot more mellow. You go back to Christianity in, say, Africa today, it's extremely violent, extremely predatory, and things like that. Like the Lord's Resistance Army in Uganda, what was it, Uganda or something like that, which was, I mean, that was a Christian version of ISIS in that sense. So the Taiping Rebellion, which was, it wasn't exactly Christian, but it was Christian inspired in a sense, the Heavenly Kingdom, and it killed off about 10-12% of China's population at that point of time. So, it's different. With Islam, you've never had that reckoning. You've never had that huge sort of clash of religion happening. You've had the Shia-Sunni thing going on and off. And so they haven't come to this entire, culturally, sociologically, they haven't come to this sort of, just live and let live. There is no way an Islamic society can declare itself secular for any period of time in that sense. There's always going to be some form of blasphemy or whatever, or sacrilege, what have you, out there. And you see that, and that really pisses me off in India, because you understand this perfectly well, and yet you will have this entire apologia for, say, the hijab. Now, I completely understand the hijab, in a sense, is just like, say, a French woman who would probably be the most sexually liberated women I know in the world, pretty much, wearing, say, makeup and this thing, because it's still a face covering. You're still doing it for social validation. It's still a covering on your face. And yes, it is very damaging, because that is why you have so many cases of anorexia, bulimia, these look-related diseases and things like that. So on one hand, you condemn the other one, but then these same liberals, they'll go about saying, hijab sets you free. It de-objectifies you. I mean, seriously, what the hell, man?
That's a forced explanation.
It's a completely forced explanation. And all this nonsense about, this Dalit Muslim unity out here, when in fact, they are in those competing spheres where Dalit Muslim violence, because of the economic strata, is at the greatest. A disprivileged group that ruled India for a long time, that refused to modernize and fell down, helped by the British as well, kicked to the curb. And the Dalits who have been oppressed by Indian society, they sort of compete for the same space. You look at butchers, for example, halal and sort of jhatka, because it was considered dirty work or whatever. That is where the greatest social friction is. And yet you're trying to weld an alliance together. It's like intersectionality. I mean, with all due respect, I'm a homosexual, and I'm never going to march with anybody that wants to throw me off the roof or refuses to condemn anything that says I should be thrown off a roof. Right? So the hypocrisy when it comes to Islam. You want to you want to go after every religion, I'll support you. But if you want to do it selectively, screw you.
So it seems like that there is a particular patch of upgrade that we could hypothetically put on, say, Hinduism and Christianity, which might be, how do we make it better? That if we apply the same to Islam, it actually promotes some sort of regressiveness. Am I correct in understanding that? It's
Yeah, pretty much. That somehow when you
try to level the playing field in this moment, you are actually not helping the case. Is that
exactly, if you sort of justify any kind of regret, or even try to explain, forget justify, you try to explain anything about Hinduism or Christianity, it's regressive. You're a right-wing homophobe or a bigot or something like that. But if you don't do that to Islam, it's sort of, you're an Islamophobe. End of story. And, Islamophobe in that sense is used the way anti-Semite used to be used to by the Anti-Defamation League and things like that. In fact, I blame them for this. They started off this entire nonsense, admitted that there were very good criteria, like, for example, blood libel and things like that, which would easily just come off. But what you're seeing on that form of speech control and delegitimization has now been, taken its natural course now, to the point where those same ADL activists now would be considered completely Islamophobic and be deplatformed.